Okay, hello everyone. Uh, so today I will be continuing with the Diamond High essay questions. So I'm looking at question 4. Should art be bought and sold like any other goods? Okay, so this is oh, by the way, if I'm speaking too slowly or like I'm taking a lot of time to think, feel free to change the pace of the video to your liking. Okay, so for this question, a should question, quite common. So for questions with the word should, I think what you want to do is it should immediately trigger in your mind, like you know that you have to discuss about things. Okay, we should be discussing things like obligation or obligation, right? So usually you want to talk about there's some kind of ethics, like an ethical dimension to it. Moral consideration. Should we eat meat, for example? So that's an question of ethics. You can also talk about desirability, right? Whether something is advantageous or not to do. And another way you can think about it is utility, right? Whether it's useful for us to do something or not. Yeah, so this generally I think would suffice in addressing the should component of most questions. So have something to say about obligations, have something to say about desirability, have something to say about utility. And then art, I think art here, we're just referring to visual art. So like your paintings, your sculpture and such. Bought and sold, I would think of it as being monetized and subjected market. It's both, right? So if you take econs, it would be your usual demand supply thing. And then another key component of this question is any other goods, right? So there is some element of comparison over here that you would have to relate art to the types of goods that are being monetized in the market. So you would have to think, you don't have to make a comparison to a particular thing, but then you should quite broadly address how works of art, how they are essentially similar or different from things that are being bought and sold in the market. Right? So you have to make that relation, I think, relate to, or relate things. Okay. Yeah, that's more or less how we would unpack the question. So important to address the should, important to address like any other goods. So essentially, again, two positions, right? Either it should be bought and sold or it should not be bought and sold. So I think if we look at some possible arguments, perhaps we can say that in a very theoretical and generic way that art is being, just number it, art being the intellectual product of an artist ought to be treated like other forms of product made by creators that people buy and sell. Right. So this point essentially what it's doing is to compare art with the other things that people buy and sell. So it can be things like, people when they go out to work, they sell experience, right? Experience. They sell expertise. They sell acumen. Right? These are things that people market themselves as a service that they provide others. So I think the line of this argument is that, well, art is something like that. It's just that I have a tangible deliverable at the end of the day, right? After my intellectual activity. So art is essentially a kind of intellectual activity, and why shouldn't a person, an artist, be able to sell it? And why shouldn't people uh, purchase it from someone who is capable of producing uh, works of art that they value, right? Okay, so this is the first argument. Second argument, you can think of uh, how there is some kind. So the first argument we are talking about uh, in terms of, uh, I suppose, both obligation and desirability. So second one, you can simply talk about desirability and utility, how selling and buying art will create some kind of usefulness in the economy. So you can say by subjecting art to the state. The artworks and encourage people, encourage the growth of art, right? So this in turn spurs, or this in turn prompt look at art as a serious vocation, rather than right. So there's always the temptation to think of art as something that is fancy, for the high class people. But then if we create a market for it, we commodify it, then more people will come to appreciate art. So there is one process of democratizing art, and then there is another process on creating an economy for it, make it something viable for people to do, rather than be seen as some very exclusive space that is only the domain of some privileged people, right? So I think the larger point here is that gone are the days where your artist is, I don't know, someone who's in his bedroom, wears an overall, wears a beret, and then he looks out of his grilled window into the sunset, paint the sunset, then go and drink himself to death. Right. So nowadays, we have some kind of. In fact, I think our society is slowly professionalizing artwork, professionalizing art creation. Right. So you have things like advertising, right? Advertising artists. You have commercial artists. You have cartoonists, right? All these are visual artists, right? So there is if you make this a viable trade, more people will come into it, and then it becomes a respectable and more, I suppose, closer to us kind of uh, vocation that people will look to do. Yeah, and maybe you want to bring up something that is closer to Singapore, like how, I think during the pandemic, there was a survey that offended a lot of artists because I think a majority of the people who were surveyed, they think that artists are not essential. And a lot of that comes from the misperception of what artists do. So they probably think of artists like how I described just now. Just some people who, very indie people who paint. But there are commercial artists. they work like a regular job like most other adults, right? Okay, so this is a point about the economy of art, how if you make it something to be bought and sold, you create a market for it, then it becomes just like a normal job. And there's some um, desirability to it, both for the artists and for, I think, people who uh, want to consume art. Okay. Uh, Maybe you can even talk about how okay. So maybe for a contrasting point and against argument, we can talk about how there is, if you introduce market forces, if you allow market forces to encroach the art sector, then you breed some kind of inequality, which is I think what we are also seeing. So maybe when market forces, okay, the intrinsic value of art and artists may be diminished, right? The reason more artists would be tempted to enter to the case of the masses, or worse still, the wealthy few, right? And then we can talk about how this goes against the spirit of art as a avenue of uh, human creative expression and insight, right? So it's this idea that if you're able to put a dollar value on something, then the value of it diminishes. And art is different from other kinds of goods in the sense that it has some intrinsic value, right? So it's not like uh food. Food is useful. Food has uh extrinsic value, right? You need food as a means to survive. And then yeah, it's not like a mop or a table, that kind of thing. So art has some value that you cannot put a money value to, right? And if you do that, you diminish the value of the work, and you diminish the value of the artist, because sometimes if I know that the way that I can make money through art is to make art that people care about, then I'm just gonna make artwork like that, right, in order to survive. So it's the argument based on intrinsic value, and then some things you buy and sell it, it loses its value, right? So yeah, okay. And just now we were talking about wealthy people also. So on a similar note, we can make a separate point about how when market forces prevail in the art industry, art descends into a spot for the wealthy and privileged, thereby depriving ordinary people to, right? So this one is basically the argument that if something has a dollar value to it, then it will breed inequality, because the person who's uh, best able to afford to pay for expensive art, that is just gonna disproportionately benefit them, right? And they might not even be the ones that appreciate it the most. They just simply have the ability to purchase art. Doesn't mean that they would be the greatest benefactor of something within intrinsic value, right? So it becomes the plaything for the rich, and it's the whole idea that we don't need to ring fence another thing for rich people to enjoy, right? So that some things, especially things with special intrinsic value, it should be for everyone, right? So things like street art, for example, is for everyone. And then, so on this note, if you want a specific example, you can think of how there are some artworks by famous artists. I think you, I think you can probably Google them quite easily. That people have never seen before. Like we know they exist because we know rich people own them, but we've never seen before because they are a collector's item, right? So they are not on, they're not found in museums. You probably know what it looks like, but then nobody has ever seen the real thing because it's being uh, collected by rich folks. So this one would be a counterpoint on why, or a point on why art shouldn't be bought and sold. Um, you can have something, I don't have like a proper way to phrase it yet, but you can have something about the art market being uh, poorly regulated or being poorly regulated. So if you are familiar, in fact, I think the intention, the person who sets the question probably would have this in mind, which is that the the official art market, not the black market, but even the official art market is very fully regulated. So you have a primary market, right? You have a primary and secondary market. So the primary market is basically the first sale. The first sale. So the artist paints something and then through his studio or through a gallery sells it, and that's his profit, that's his gain. And then the secondary market is basically your resale market. That's where all the exorbitant uh, prices in art, that's where they all happen. Right? All your 50 million artworks. So they usually, you're talking about uh, auction houses, like Christie's, I think. Christie's and Christie's and there's one. Sotheby's. Right? So these are your auction houses, and they make a huge amount of money through reselling art. And the thing is that there are there isn't a very strong legal framework around to credit the original artist. So I think there's this person, you can uh, Google him. It's called Peter Doig, right? So he's a Scottish painter, and his entire body of work, I think, is raked in like about 250 million. But his own take is like, I think according to him, it's like 65K. So the money is going somewhere else. The money is going to the collectors. The money is going to the auction houses or the brokers, but it's not going to the original artist. So this is an ethical issue, right? So maybe there's an argument that we shouldn't be buying and selling these things because they are just uh, the original creator of the art is not even getting compensated. So we shouldn't be we shouldn't encourage, right, an economy like that. Okay. So but this one is an argument that is uh, having to be easily rebutted. So you don't want to use it as your, like a killer argument. The killer argument is probably this too. Right? So this one you can use it as an aside just to show off your knowledge. Yeah, and then maybe there is a point you want to make about ill-gotten artwork, right? So you're talking about artworks that are bought and sold after they are being looted. So I think there is a big case on Nazi looting. So works of art being looted by the Nazis that found its way to the art market. I think there's one also on Imelda Marcos's artworks. So this is the widow of Ferdinand Marcos, the Filipino dictator. So they are, I think, generally recognized as a corrupt family, and a lot of that. So they once sold some artwork for a few million. They made a profit out of it, but the way that they obtained this art are through uh, siphoning public money, right? So there is some moral issues here. That's why we shouldn't uh, buy and sell. But this one again is a subset. It's not. We are not talking about art in general. We are talking about ill-gotten artworks. But it's an interesting subset that you might want to talk about. Yeah, and then there is, I think, one you can just Google Christie's auction or Nigerian. So it's looted from the Civil War, and then they went ahead to auction it for a few $1 million, much to the anger of, I think, the art community, your art critics. Okay, so yeah, that's all the arguments I have. As for your thesis, let's see if I can. As for the thesis, you might want to have something like, okay, so I think this is a very powerful argument, and so is this. And they are quite, you can't agree to both. If you agree that, if you think that, it should just be like any other intellectual property, creators are free to buy it, consumers are free, creators are free to sell it, consumers are free to buy it. If you accept this principle, then you cannot also say that, but then we need to guard against we shouldn't buy and sell it because it will create some kind of inequality. So it's up to you to take your stand. For me, I would take this one. I think this is a stand that I would take, and I will either bite the bullet and say that yeah, we would have some kind of inequality, but then it's a necessary evil, right? That if you deny art creators from selling their work, I think you would be doing a greater disservice to people who appreciate art and people who create art, right? So I will bite the bullet and concede this point, right? But I would still take the stand that we should be able to buy and sell art. Okay, so if you can take the opposite view. I think it's fine. I don't have an argument, a thesis on that, so I'll just give you the thesis on arguing for how you should be able to buy and sell art. So it would be something like, well, works of art, the value of the book, and therefore should not be used to qualities points. There is a not equal from the subjective market exposed, or there are essential similarities. Art, other types experts, by people. Granted, one might have a case for regulating an art, but prohibiting the market entirely a flagrant disservice to the readers and readers of art. Okay, so something like that, right? So I have the qualification here that how I would concede point three by saying that, well, okay, we need some kind of regulation. We don't want the super rich to be able to own everything, all kinds of artwork in the world. But then there is a lot of value, there's a lot of utility in allowing people to sell their creative work and allowing people to buy them so that we can support them, right? Okay, so taking that away from people would be a greater disservice than, simply allowing rich people to have another plaything, right? So weigh the pros and cons, we take this position. Okay, so you don't have to argue the way I did, and you can make this your main point and then formulate a thesis. I think it would also be acceptable. I think both arguments are quite strong. Yeah, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.